Did you know that Asperger's syndrome, though no longer a formal diagnosis, remains a crucial part of many autistic people's identities? For some, it's what autism is. For others, it's also a name tied to a troubling history. Welcome to Neurodifference, the podcast that shines a light on neurodiverse and neurodivergent conditions. I'm Rhys Jenkins, and today I'll be talking about a big question. What is Asperger's syndrome? Together, we'll explore its history, its impact, and why the name is so controversial today. So what is Asperger's syndrome? It was historically classified as a form of autism characterized by social difficulties, narrow interests, and sensory sensitivities, but without significant delays in language or cognition. In earlier diagnostic manuals, like the DSM-4, it was considered distinct from classic autism mainly by higher functioning in language and intellect. In fact, it's clear that Asperger's shares enough characteristics with classic autism, particularly high-functioning autism, to be considered part of the spectrum. Originally named after Austrian clinician Hans Asperger, Asperger's syndrome became an official diagnosis in the 1990s, added to the ICD in 1993 and the DSM in 1994. However, modern diagnostic manuals no longer use Asperger's as a separate label. The American Psychiatric Association removed Asperger's syndrome in the DSM-5 in 2013, integrating it under the broader umbrella of autism spectrum disorder, or condition, as I personally rather. Common traits associated with Asperger's include sensory sensitivities, are frequently reported. For instance, an intolerance to certain noises or lights can overwhelm someone who prefers to refer to themselves as Asperger's. As one individual pointed out, many Asperger's traits become disabling only in unfriendly environments. An intolerance to loud noises is a disability in a crowded shopping centre, but not on a farm. This being in the Life with Asperger's .blogspot.com, which I will include in the video description. And this highlights that the condition's challenges are often tied to context. Despite its deprecation as a medical diagnosis, the term Asperger's has held significant meaning for many individuals. For years, it offered a sense of identity and community to those who felt different. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, people diagnosed with Asperger's often embraced the label Aspie with pride. For them, Asperger's syndrome is more than just a diagnosis. Since the 1990s, it has also served as a cultural identity for people on the spectrum who derive a sense of pride and community from the term Aspie. This being highlighted in the thinkingautismguide.com. Before the unification of the diagnosis under ASD or ASC, having the Asperger's label helped many individuals understand themselves and connect with others who had similar experiences. It provided an identity that said, I am not different, I am different, not broken. Hans Asperger, as highlighted before, was an Austrian clinician and pediatrician whose research in the 1940s laid the groundwork for what later became known as Asperger's syndrome. He is famous for not only giving his name to Asperger's syndrome, which, as we all know, became a form of people describing themselves as high-functioning autistic. But he was also considered one of the forerunners of autism and Asperger's syndrome research. Asperger's seminal paper in 1944 detailed case studies of children who exhibited autistic-like behaviors, but with average or high intelligence. One blog highlights that he wrote about a particularly interesting and highly recognizable type of child. The blog also highlights that these children had strong vocabularies and specific interests, but struggled with social integration. These are traits that are very well known in those who refer to themselves as Aspergers in their profile, and also in autistic people's profile too, in the DSM diagnostic criteria. Academic Lorna Wing coined the term Asperger's syndrome in a 1981 paper, building on Asperger's description of autistic psychopathy, his original term for the condition. In 1991, Asperger's 1944 paper was translated into English by Uta Frith. A blog highlights that soon after this translation, the syndrome was officially included in the diagnostic manuals ICD-10 and DSM-4. I reckon the work of Frith and Lorna Wing was a big influence in that. In summary, Hans Asperger's contribution was identifying characteristics commonly found in autistic people. He provided one of the earliest characterizations of autism's more subtle presentations, emphasizing that autistic traits exist even in children with fluent speech and normal IQ. As a result, his name became commonly known in the autistic community in the UK, linking him permanently to this part of autism history. In recent years, the legacy and image of Hans Asperger has been hugely scrutinized. And this is down to disturbing revelations about his ties to the Nazi regime. Historical research uncovered evidence that Asperger was complicit in Nazi eugenics policies during World War II. The Thinking Autism Guide highlights that scholars Edith Schaeffer and Herwig Czech in publications from 2018 revealed that although Asperger never joined the Nazi Party, he cooperated with Nazi authorities in ways that harmed patients. They found Asperger was willing to go along with his Nazi bosses, even to the point of referring patients to Am Spielgrund, a mental institution where during the war years, children with hereditary disabilities were put to death. And thus, off the back of this reveal, the debate started over whether members of the autism community should continue using Asperger's name. Many have questioned the appropriateness of honouring Asperger's given his link to such atrocities. In fact, Edith Schaeffer, who wrote Asperger's Children, argues that the term Asperger's syndrome should be consigned to the dustbin of history. She and others, including myself, feel that given Asperger's actions during the war, it is unethical to keep his name as a label for autistic people. And I feel that this controversy added weight to the DSM-5's decision to drop the term, even though that decision was officially and primarily based on diagnostic reasoning. But not everyone agrees on the extent of Asperger's complicity. Some historians, like Czech, argue his scientific contributions aren't invalidated by the context, as highlighted in thinkingautismguide.com. Nevertheless, the revelations have undeniably tainted the Asperger name. In terms of personal perspective, social navigation is a significant challenge for people who refer to themselves with Asperger's. Highlighted by the Life with Asperger's blog, people who refer to themselves with Asperger's often struggle with understanding social cues, making small talk, or forming friendships. This is not due to lack of desire, but because their communication style and interests can be out of sync with their peers. I think this can lead to them feeling socially isolated. On the other hand, intense focus and attention to detail are frequently cited strengths. Many ASPI individuals have deep knowledge in their areas of interest, be it computers, astronomy, trains, the FIFA World Cup, and a strong focus on tasks. One advantage of people who refer to themselves as Asperger's thinking style is being a deeper thinker, approaching problems with thorough analysis and creativity. In the words of the same blogger, in the case of the Asperger's individual, it's clear that they are generally deeper thinkers than neurotypicals. This capacity for deep thinking, along with honesty, loyalty, and logical reasoning, are for me reason that people who refer to themselves as Asperger's have a different ability as well as disability. In terms of identity and language, the thinkingautismguide.com highlights that within the autistic community, there is an ongoing conversation about identity and the language used to describe it. Ever since the diagnosis was absorbed into ASD or ASC, people have been divided on whether to continue using the Asperger's label, including myself. Some individuals proudly cling to the and continue to refer to themselves as Asperger's or Aspie identity. As the discourse around DSM-5 changes notes, others have held on to the Asperger's Aspie identity despite it no longer being an official medical diagnosis, and also given the controversy. For me personally, I prefer using autism or autistic spectrum condition. The thinkingautismguide.com also highlights that many autistic self-advocates feel similar to myself. They prefer to identify simply as autistic without subtypes to promote unity and avoid what they see as unnecessary distinctions. Some even feel that continuing to use the Asperger's label creates division or elitism by implying a hierarchy, so-called high-functioning versus low-functioning autism. Autistic writer Maxfield Sparrow, for instance, recounts that although he was once diagnosed with Asperger's, he later rejected that label. While my second diagnosis was Asperger's syndrome, I rejected the Asperger's label many years before the DSM-5 came out and do not feel like being called an Aspie. I felt that those who continued to use the Asperger's label were clinging onto it because it was the equivalent of calling oneself a high-functioning autistic. Sparrow admits he used to criticize people who still identified as Aspie, perceiving it as buying into a false notion of superiority. I believe that by calling each other as autistic helps promote a sense of unity that myself and Maxwell have promoted. Although I am keen to say that there are many times that I personally found it very challenging to say to people that they should refer to themselves as autistic rather than as with Asperger's. In conclusion, Asperger's syndrome was historically a term used to describe specific traits now recognized under the autism spectrum. Hans Asperger's contributions are shadowed by his controversial history. Many people continue to identify with the term, seeing it as an integral part of their journey, whereas others disagree. If today's discussion resonated with you or sparked questions, comments, please put these in the comments section. Whether it's understanding the history or learning from personal stories, there is so much more information to uncover. And it is only by uncovering said information that we can continue to make a positive neurodifference in the world.